What will it take then for the alliance to shift from more defensive to offensive, if you want to call it that? Because it seems to be that right now the NATO alliance does do the bare minimum, and this mentality of not
Well,
wanting to risk.
I don't accept that. That's not true. They don't do bare minimum, but the military has to respond to what the political leadership directs. And so you still have some countries that are reluctant to do what needs to be done, whereas you've got others who are ready to go. So I would not say the alliance does the bare minimum. That's not an accurate portrayal. Now, it certainly would be helpful if the United States would play a much more decisive leading role in all of this, but I just don't see that happening. The president has talked over and over and over for months about consequences for Russia if and so on, and he's never really done anything. And so I just don't see anything happening. So the rest of Europe is going to have to figure out how to do this. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting around and waiting for a big disaster to happen, and then be looking at each other like, how'd that happen? We never saw that coming. Well, of course we saw that coming.
Okay, I meant more in the sense of they want to avoid escalation, although, as you've pointed out, the balance of power and capabilities is not exactly equal if you're involving the entirety of NATO. But it seems to be that we do have a much more assertive Eastern Bloc, this sort of Eastern Sentinel idea, versus Western European nations, which remain somewhat complacent. I mean, the French have now had yet another political crisis. The Prime Minister seems to have resigned after less than a month. So, are we going to see a unity? Yes, but almost like an Eastern Europe, which is more proactive, leading, and then sort of Western Europe, which remains a little bit complacent, which could still therefore work in the favor of Moscow, because they can try to drive that wedge between West-East. Or that's not a scenario you think is very plausible?
Well, I think I was happy to see the chief of defense of the French armed forces just the other day says that French forces have to be ready to fight tonight. That's a new, recognition of the need for readiness. And then I just read a piece by the French commander responsible for transport, talking about the challenges of moving from west to east fast enough. So the threat, I think the French get it, certainly in the military. UK, for the most part, seems to get that. But there is a sort of a condescension that comes from Western Europe, particularly Germany and the Netherlands, towards Poland and Baltic countries. You saw the former German Bundeskanzler Merkel. She just did an interview and said that it really was the fault of the Baltic states and Poland that Russia invaded Ukraine. That's ridiculous. But there is some of that still there. But the United States, we have failed to do what needs to be done to provide the leadership and impetus. So we're going to end up mucking along until there's a disaster. But I'm tired of hearing people shake their fists, say, we need to do something. We need to go faster. I was just in Spain myself this past week at a conference, and people, they all nod their head like, yes, we've got to do more. But, Spain's a 1%er right now. So, or they're definitely not a 2%er, I should say. So until people wake up and realize that Russia, this is not a game, then we're going to continue to have some challenges. In the meanwhile, people that live closest to Russia know Russia the best, from Finland all the way down to Romania. They're not confused.